All right, then we're good to go. I will make sure, I know there are some load shedding scheduled, right? So for those of you who might drop off, I'll make sure you get the link so that you don't miss anything. And yeah, I do put this also away in case people come back for anything that they need. The session today that I want to do today, I've done this session at the end of last year, if I remember correctly. We had a 3-part series for mental training for athletes. So what I took for today was just really what I think the most important part is, and I wanted to focus on visualization as well for today. So I am going to share some slides. You are welcome to make print screens or anything if there's something that might be useful for you. Okay, let me know if you can see the slides. Just a thumbs up if you guys can see the slides.
Petrolien, we can.
Yeah, I can see. I can see it.
You are on presenter view.
Hang on. Yeah, that's something you'll need to change. Oh, well, hang on. Let's try again. Do you see the slide deck now? The full screen.
Yes, I can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
perfect. It's not presenter now, Werner, right?
No.
Okay,
it's
cool.
Good now.
Okay, got it. All right. So, yeah, like I said, I wanted to focus today. I have 2 screens open here, so forgive me if I look back and forth. And I have my notes here. Otherwise, I can go on a tangent forever. I think for those of you who've met me, like Melusi will know, we can speak forever, or I could speak forever about this topic. I'm very passionate about it, very near and dear to my heart. So while we wait, I know there might be some people that will join us. While we wait, if you don't mind, let us know in the chat box where you are from and in what sport are you involved in, either as an athlete or as a coach. Yeah, that would be great. I will share a little bit about myself in a minute. But if you can let us know what sport you are involved in. I know Melusi is driving. He is involved in rugby. Henning is involved in rugby. Other folks, rugby. Andre is involved in rugby. I think we have a bunch of rugby people on here. Rugby, Justin, rugby. Justin from Bethlehem, Stellenbosch, rugby and cricket. Rugby. All right, mostly rugby, I see. That's good. And cricket. So yeah, that's great. For those of you who do not know me or haven't met me before, I am a mental performance coach. I am actually a nurse by training many moons ago, and then I went in. Oh, this is the most hideous picture I have of me in CrossFit. And one of the reasons I always, well, not always use this picture is there's a little story behind this, which if I remember, I'll come back to this. But I'm a nurse by training. After about 4 or 5 years, I've worked in the emergency room. So a lot of rugby kids there normally on a Saturday afternoon. But then went into medical research, where my main focus was to build high performance teams for clients that we worked with. Like, I mean, clients in the pharma industry are not easy people to work with. But yeah, my main role was to build high performance teams. And then about 10 years ago, I went into health coaching. From there, that's really where I started to see athletes and people that wanted to become better in terms of their health overall, but also from a sporting perspective in terms of their eating. Then I did a little bit, touched a little bit on food addiction because of the neuroscience behind that and the behavior about people, because that's really the part that fascinates me. I love the neuroscience. I will share a little bit of science today. And oops, sorry, hang on. I will share a little bit of neuroscience today. Do you still see the presentation? Yeah, so I will share a little bit about the neuroscience today. I will try not to make it too complicated so that for those of you not familiar with biology and things like that, at least will understand it. Because it's really important for me to make sure that you understand the why, and I can send you away with information and you can go back and apply it in different circumstances. So after that, my main sport currently is CrossFit, and what I am involved in and what I'm doing, I'm also a CrossFit coach. And then I also ventured into martial arts a few months ago, actually only. And I did that specifically to test some of these mental protocols that I'm working on and things around that. So that's really how I got involved in that. And then I did my CBD practitioner, my NLP, and my life coaching certification from Modern Applied Psychology in Scotland online. So that's sort of the gist of who I am. So just quickly to go back to the agenda, if you guys have any questions, we have a roadrunner, Mapulu, welcome. If you have any questions, I'm not going to monitor the chat box. Like there's a lot going on, so I'm not going to necessarily monitor the chat box while I'm busy. But if something catches my eye, I'll answer the question. Otherwise, we will come back towards the end and go through any questions that there might be. But please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box. So what I wanted to do today is to share a little bit about how we process information, because that is going to be important to understand how our thoughts become feelings, and I have a little bit of more information around that. And then we're going to do an exercise, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about visualization. All right, so to start off things. We all, hang on. Okay. We all experience the world through our five senses. So now if you think about a child, a baby is only born with what we would call two fears. They are afraid that they might fall. They are afraid of loud noises. Now, if you ever have seen a baby, a newborn especially, if you put them on your hand, or if you almost like as if you want to drop them, you will see their hands will go like that. And even if they lie on a bed or somewhere and there's a door slamming or anything like that, you will see their hands go like that. So that's the only, and we actually test that when a baby is born. We test those reflexes to see how they have neurologically developed in the womb. But that's the only thing they are born with. Every single other thing that they are doing, and everything up and until where you are today and where I am today, that has been learned. Everything else is learned. The great thing about that is if it's learned and it's unhelpful behavior, it can be unlearned, which is just something you can keep in mind. But we take in all of the information from our world through our five senses. And it comes in through our conscious mind. I'm not going to go into detail about that. But we hear things, we see things, our visual aspect of our senses, our eyes and what we see, that gives the majority of information that comes in through our one of the main senses. We smell things, not so much, but if you think about a memory you might have where a smell is specifically attached to that, maybe the beach, you had a great holiday or something like that. We taste things and we hear things. We feel things, sorry. Feel in terms of what we touch, and feel in terms of what we feel on our skin, especially if you're outside, you feel the wind, you feel I mean, the runners often talk about this when they run, especially if they do long distance, they can feel the wind on their body, whatever the case might be. So all of the information around us come into our brain through our five senses. when we attach meaning to it, our brain actually kickstarts a process of chemical process, a mechanism of chemical processes. And what then happens is we attach a story or a narrative, which we will eventually call a memory, but we attach a meaning to it, which becomes a story or a narrative. And then our brain actually orders it and files it in compartments in our subconscious mind. So it will group things together. And I have not included that in today's session, but maybe in January when I do another session, I can talk about that in terms of how we make connections and how important that is for especially skill learning in sport as well, and then eventually motivation. When we attach then the meaning to something, it becomes a memory, and that biochemical process that kickstarts in your brain, that mechanism that kickstarts in your brain, then creates certain feelings and emotions. And we often talk about our bodily state is changing. So if you have ever been in a situation where you felt anxious, or you felt that your heart was racing, or even you felt like tears were welling up in your eye, whatever the case might be, that is a physical state of your body that is changing. So that's important to remember. When I talk about changes in your bodily state or physical state, that's what we mean. Even if you are like have shivers and the hair stands up on your arms, that's a change in your bodily state. Now, our brains cannot process all of the information that there is. If we, throughout the day, we are bombarded by sensory information that comes in from our environment. And if our brain had to process everything, our minds will explode, or our brains will completely explode. Our brains do not have the ability to process all of that masses of information. So what it does is, it actually just takes a snapshot of the experience. So takes that snapshot, and then it is like a smaller amount, a smaller megabyte of information that it will then file and store in your brain. Now, it's similar to when you are at a place or at a holiday, or you had there's a lot of folks that are in team sports here. You had a specific experience in the team, and you have photos of that, and you go through the photos. The photo is literally only a snapshot of what has happened in that experience. But when you and a buddy actually sit down and look at the photo, you can talk for half an hour about that experience as if you are in the experience. So that's similar to what our brain is doing with all of the information that comes in. Now, every time you have a thought, so this is just something I want to run you through to keep this in mind, but we are really going to talk about thoughts, feelings, and emotions up and until actions for the visualization. But this is an important aspect of the whole process to keep in mind going forward. So the process goes something like this. You have a thought that comes into your mind. Now, this whole process flowing out of this one in terms of how a thought is being created, how do you anchor certain experiences with certain emotions and things like that, that I'm not going to cover today. But just know, you as an individual, everybody, all of us, a thought comes into your mind, and we choose to respond to that thought based on all the learnings that we've gone through in our life. So we choose to respond to that thought. It kickstarts literally a whole host of chemical reactions, and you start to experience emotions and sensations in your body physically. And that's the important part also to understand today. If you bring up that thought many times, that same thought, I quickly want to backtrack first to say as well is that for every single experience, every single thought you have, there's what we would sometimes refer to a cocktail of chemicals, a cocktail of a chemical reaction that will happen. That is unique to that experience. So let's say, and it's not as easy to say that if you jump off a cliff, this is what's happening in your body. And if you drive in a Formula One car, this is what's happening. It's not that easy to sort of distinguish between the chemical process or the mechanisms. But just know for every single emotion that comes up, there's a different cocktail of chemicals or a different cocktail of a mechanism that's released in your brain. So when you have this thought and then emotions and a certain feeling, for today's purpose, I'm going to use emotions and feelings. They're not quite the same thing, but I'm going to refer to them as the same thing. That will cause a physical change in your body, like I said previously. So let's say you are anxious, you are at the starting line of a marathon, and you are extremely anxious, you had a bad night's sleep, whatever the case might be, and your heart starts racing because you are nervous. It's because you started to think about certain stuff, and it created a physical response in your body. So if you have that thought and that emotion and feeling that's attached to it many times, I'm not going to cover that so much today, but just know if you have that many times, like the same thing over and over and over, it actually becomes your attitude. So it's that cycle of short-term thoughts and feelings that you experience over and over and over again. And you might have seen this with an individual that had a particular experience and suddenly the attitude changes. If they are persistent with that process and that attitude, and they maintain that short-term attitude long enough, for months, we're now talking about months, it actually becomes their actions and behavior. So now they have certain actions that sort of validate the attitude that they have. And if they do those actions, behaviors, and bad habits long enough, it now becomes their identity. So I want you to see sort of how I thought initially, and it's not as easy as one single thought, it could be, but not necessarily, but how your thoughts actually can create who you are and who the person, like your complete identity, who you are today. Which can be helpful, your thoughts and your behaviors can be helpful, or it can be completely unhelpful, right? In which case people need to seek help and do all sort of remediations to fix whatever's going on in their life. So that is the summary in terms of that. So before I go further, I quickly want to do an exercise. I want you to play along. This is important because I want you to sort of experience the whole process of mental rehearsal so that you can understand it better. Mental rehearsal is really, I mean, most of you would know, it's a technique where you really mentally rehearse any upcoming experiences or performances that you have. And the main thing about mental rehearsal, and I will touch on that a little bit later as well, is that you want to get all of your senses involved. So with this exercise, I want to take you through that process to help you what it would feel like and how does that work. And it's a very powerful technique to bring information up into your conscious mind from your unconscious mind. So what I want you to do, I'm not going to do anything weird. You don't have to be worried about that. But I'm just going to ask you, take you through a process. I'm going to ask you to imagine something, and I'm going to take you through the process, and then we'll just hear what is your feedback at the end. So I want you to close your eyes. Then I want you can sit back. Don't worry about what's going on around you. You can just listen to what I'm going to ask you to do through the exercise. And I want you to think about the best moment of your life that you've ever experienced. It can be something that it doesn't matter when it was, when you were young, recently, it doesn't really matter. But I want you to find the best moment of your life that you've ever experienced. And make sure that it is a great positive moment that you do not want to forget. It must be something positive. Doesn't necessarily have to be a strong thing, because remember, a strong experience can also be negative. So I want you to make sure that it's a positive experience that you are currently imagining. And I want you, as you think about that experience, I want you to point towards where you feel that in your body. Where in your body do you feel that if you think about that experience? And it can be anywhere. It can be your head, it can be your body, it can be your heart, doesn't matter. Where do you feel something if you think about that experience? Okay, good. So I want you to imagine you are sitting there now, and this whole experience now is floating around you. And there is a picture in front of you of this experience. And I want you to actually reach out and touch the picture. Reach out and grab the picture as if it's like a photograph that's there. And I want you to look at the picture and notice how big it is. And I want you to notice if it's color or black and white. And I want you to notice if it's moving. Is it like a moving picture, a movie that you see, or is it the still picture? And I want you to feel and see how close it is to your body. And I want you to listen if there's any sounds that you hear in that experience that you're currently thinking of now. Do you hear people around you, or is it quiet? And I want you to think about any feelings or feel any feelings and notice any feelings that you might be experiencing now. And I want you now to soak in that picture that you've grabbed onto. And just to make sure it's the right one, I want you to actually take both of your hands and grab the picture as if you are holding a piece of paper in front of you. And then what I want you to do is I want you to actually make that picture bigger. You know, like you would zoom in on a phone screen. Just pull the edges apart and make that picture bigger. And I want you to make it bigger and bigger. And what I want you to do now is actually take that picture, lift it up, and pull it over your head, down through your entire body. Very good. You can open your eyes. Does anybody want to tell me how that felt? Anybody want to unmute and tell me how that felt? There's not a right and wrong.
I felt excitement.
Okay. Werner, anything you felt? And if you felt nothing, that's fine. It's not a...
I don't want to jump on his back, but I also felt excitement when I thought about it. So.
Okay. Henning, I actually saw a smile on your face. I didn't see the other people, but I saw a smile on your face. Couldn't see the other folks. So here's what I want to explain to you, that if you can think about, or if you can have a thought that can actually literally change your physical state. Like, I mean, you started smiling, or you felt excitement, you felt a certain emotion just by thinking about it. Here's the thing, our body doesn't know if the thing that you're thinking about is presently happening to you or whether it's a thought of the past. Our mind doesn't know that, our body doesn't know the difference. A good example of this is if you have ever experienced something that you've really worried about, like really had anxiety or anything in that regard, where you constantly thought about it and it started to make you anxious. Your body doesn't know whether you are actually now experiencing that event and you are in the event, or whether you are just fabricating a thought in your mind. And that is how powerful our mind is in terms of visualization and how we can utilize visualization. Because if your body doesn't know the difference, whether it's something that has happened in the past or whether it's something that you are in now, you can actually create something with something that hasn't happened yet. I hope that makes sense. What I want to do is I want to do another, well, actually show you a video. Let me just quickly, sorry, I just where am I now? I just quickly want to get it up here. So for those of you who watch Formula One, you would have seen this scene. It's from the Bahrain Grand Prix in 2020, end of 2020. It's also an excerpt from the documentary Drive to Survive, Formula One Drive to Survive. But I'm going to show you the video. I want you to watch it, and then we'll speak about what you've experienced afterwards. I am apologizing. There's a lot of F-bombs that they are throwing around because they do share live audio from individuals, from race car drivers, and actually individuals in the pit lanes. So yeah, apologize for that. But let me quickly share that. All right. So you could see he was okay at the end. But whose hearts are racing? So why did I show you that? There's a lot more visuals involved. There's a lot more, if you think back to the 5 senses, sound effects involved. Obviously, they have created a narrative for that entire story because it was aired in a documentary. But that whole scene only took 29 seconds. For those of you who don't know, it's only 29 seconds from the start of the crash until he got out. So here is what is important, that when you do your visualization, you want to take time and run your entire experience, whatever it is you want to visualize, through all of the detail and through an entire narrative. For those of you who don't know, actually the amazing part of this is they restarted the race after that. So he got away with second-degree burns on his hands and feet, but there was 19 drivers that had to get back into their cars and start the race again. And I think that was tough. That must have been extremely tough. So anyway, that is one of the main reasons why I've shown you this. These pictures, you hear the sound effects. Like I said, there was a whole story created around this. Now, let's get back to the last few slides I want to share. Now I just need to, sorry, I'm just want to share the right thing here. Bear with me. Let me know if you can't see everybody. Yeah, let me know if you see the slide deck and not the presenter view. Slide deck. Okay, cool. So as humans, we are the only species on Earth that have that unique ability through our conscious mind to make thought more real than anything else. No other creature can do that. It's not like, have you ever seen a cat or a dog that are scared of something that hasn't happened yet? Highly unlikely, right? It's like they hear something and then they're scared. So we just think of something, then we're scared. So the reason why we have specific emotions about something, right? Even like now, if you think back to that scene, and even if you think back to your experience that you've recalled when you closed your eyes, we did that exercise, is you have an embedded neural pathway in your brain that can call up the memory with the emotions to your conscious mind. Now, just quickly as a sideline thing, especially when you work with athletes, and this is a little bit more on the mental side, you can only work on something when you call it up into the conscious mind. In other words, that's why we always tell people you have to speak about it so that it become alive for you, because then you can reason it through and think about that, right? So people that always suppresses the emotions and feelings, it's very hard for them to do something about that. But just a little snippet for those of you who work with athletes. So like I said, your body has no idea whether you are actually in the situation or whether you just saw a picture, had a thought, heard something. That biochemical reaction is exactly the same. The mechanism work exactly the same. Now, if we can make, like I said in the beginning, if we can make thoughts of the past so real that we can have a physical reaction, then we can make thoughts of the future just as real so that we can have a physical reaction. And hence create new neural pathways and keep on ingraining those neural pathways. So that's where the mental rehearsal comes in and where that's important, because if we repeatedly think about something to the exclusion of everything else, we can encounter a moment or an experience where that thought actually becomes the experience. And if you go further into the actual experience, then you start to move into the flow experience and getting into the zone and things like that. Now, this is not just positive thinking. And I think you will understand after today, this is way more than just positive thinking, because if positive thinking would have worked, everybody would have won whatever it is that they want to win, and every game that you want to win if you only think positive about the game. But it's the mental rehearsal is work. There's some work you have to put into it. So your brain, like I said, has no idea. And some people will find it hard to visualize things mentally. Some people will find it extremely easy. If I took you through that exercise where you had to think about an experience, if that was difficult for you, not to worry. I mean, you're going to have people for whom that's going to be difficult as well. It's just something you need to practice. It's a skill like kicking a ball, like jumping over a hurdle. It's a skill that you have to learn. And as you continue to do that, if you go back to that little circle, as you continue to do it, it becomes actually extremely natural and extremely easy to do. And I'll share a little story about one of the athletes that I've worked with over the past year. Now, there was great work in the 1960s done by Robert Shepard and others at Stanford. So where they actually looked at the ability of people to rotate 3D objects in their mind. Like I said, for some, it's easy. For others, it's extremely difficult. But what they've also found is that you can actually get better at repeating it. So it's not, and I think you all would understand by now, that mental rehearsal is not a total replacement for physical exercise itself or physical performance itself. So no, just sitting there, contracting a muscle, it will not lead to the same gains. Just sitting there, imagining you kicking a ball through the pole, it's not going to have the same effect. But it is an extremely powerful supplement or support to physical training. And skill learning as well. I'm going to explain to you how you can actually use that in skill learning in ways that, like I've said, that it's extremely powerful. In 2004, there was another interesting study done by Ganis, and I hope I pronounce it correctly, and his team, where they actually had a group of subjects. It's a good study that they've done because they had a control group as well, where they gave them certain movements to do. I mean, some of the movements were like flexion of their finger, others had to do bicep curls and things like that. So there was the group that did it physically against resistance. And there was then the other group that mentally had to rehearse the movement as if they were doing it against resistance. So they had to imagine that they are moving that body part against resistance. Now, what they found is that the ones that have actually imagined the movement and mentally rehearsed the movement, their movement strength ranged increased from between 13.5% to 35%, depending on what movement it was. Actually, if I remember correctly, the finger flexion was the one that had the most improvement with 35%. And other movements like the bicep curls and things like that were around 13.5%. Which is impressive, right? Because considering that they've only done it mentally. But when we look at the actual group, the physical group, the folks that did the physical exercise or movement, their strength increased at around 53%. So there is a ton of studies that do support the fact that obviously you cannot just do mental training, but it's a great supplementation for your physical training. So the whole process of mental rehearsal, when you do mental rehearsal, it actually engages the activity of the upper motor neurons in your brain that control deliberate action, that part of your brain. So that is why it is so effective. So the whole process around mental rehearsal, in other words, like closing your eyes, imagining what you would sometimes hear in one's mind's eye, create that activation in the upper motor neurons in your brain, similar as if you were actually doing the movement. So what is the best way to implement the mental rehearsal? You want to make sure that you get all of your senses involved. So you have to do the visual. So there are two ways you can do it. The first one I'm going to talk about when you are going into an experience, like when you have to run a race, when you have to you have a specific game that you're going to play. Also for those of you who work with team members, obviously you cannot mentally rehearse what the other team members are doing, but your mental rehearsal starts at the moment that the individual, let's say, for example, passes you the ball. That's where your mental rehearsal starts, where you see the individual passes you the ball, but you obviously cannot mental rehearse what they are going to do. That's why the mental rehearsal, when you discuss a movement with a group or a team, that everybody knows what is expected and you want them to go and rehearse that particular movement with their involvement. So let's say, for example, you run a race, you have a marathon that you're going to run. You want to mentally rehearse how you're going to go through that process. So I'm going to use an example. I do a little bit of weightlifting as well. I'm going to use a weightlifting example as well. So what that would look like is that you really want to visually visualize or visually imagine, mentally rehearse, whichever word you want to use, your entire day from the moment you get up. You want to mentally rehearse everything you do up and until the point you get to the venue. You want to mentally rehearse your state of mind. How are you feeling? You want to mentally rehearse what are you seeing around you? What are you hearing? And who are the people that are there? What are the people talking about? What do you want them to talk about, right? That is important. What does the environment look like and how are you feeling? That is also important in terms of how that you want to be calmed down. You don't want to be stressed. Exactly how it is, that perfect picture is you want to run through every single thing. And it's important that you keep those 5 senses involved. What is it that you're seeing? What is it that you're hearing? What is it that you're feeling? And in some instances, if you are a surfer, you might taste the seawater and the saltiness of the seawater, and what it is that you are smelling. That might also be the case in such an instance. But you want to visualize the time. You want to visualize a turn, especially if you're a runner. You want to visualize the start, the middle, the finish. If you are a middle distance runner, you want to visualize every single part of that experience. Now, if you have in instances like rugby, where you have a 90-minute game, you want to focus on certain movements. That's the part that you want to visualize. If you have an individual that might be negative or struggle to be positive and struggle with motivation, that's the part, let's say, for example, you want to have them visualize that how they are feeling, that they are feeling better, how they laugh, how they are in a more joyous spirit. So you really want to visualize all of those aspects. And that is so that is the big difference between thinking positive and real effective visualization, is you want to have those senses involved as if you are in that situation. That is important, because here's what's going to happen. When you, let's say, for example, I'm coming back to my weightlifting example. When I visualize the lift, I was stepping onto the platform, I visualize the lift, I visualize where the lift must hit my body, I visualize going under the bar, I visualized standing the bar up, everything until I saw a white flag. When I visualize that over and over and over again, I create the same neural pathways I would have created have I thought negatively about something or have I worried about something. And here's what's going to happen. The moment that I step onto that platform, my mind is telling my body, oh, this looks familiar. I know exactly what I need to do. And that is the power that you will get out of the mental rehearsal and the visualization. Just quickly before I go back, talk about an example and what we've done with one of the athletes that I've worked with. When you learn or teach a team or an individual a new skill, you can learn faster through visualization. And then one of the best techniques that you can do in terms of mental rehearsal is, once you've taught them the skill, immediately after that, you don't really want them to get busy with other things, especially not on their phones or get busy with a ton of other stuff. If possible, immediately after that, you want them to visualize the skill that you've taught them, especially if it's something new. In kids as well, if it's something that they haven't done before, you show them, you teach them and show them exactly what needs to happen, where the ball should be, whatever the case might be. But then immediately, the sooner after that you visualize that movement over and over, take some 10 minutes, visualize it over and over, you can actually accelerate skill learning through that process. Okay. Not something that I wanted to focus on today, but some useful snippets in terms of how you can actually utilize the visualization. So I worked specifically in the past year. I've worked with Luzanne. Some of you might know her. She is, interestingly enough, a blind athlete. And now it's like I talk about visualization, but I work with a blind athlete. But just know that blind people also see the world. They see it differently, but they also see the world. I don't want to say like you and I, but they see things. And she has been participating in athletics for 8 years, never came back with a medal in any major championship. Started working with her in the beginning of last year, and as soon as we knew that the Olympic Games was going to go ahead, we sort of actively started working on skills like visualization. And visualization for her was one of the most efficient and effective things that she worked on. There's a ton of other things that we're now going to add on top of her training, but that was one of the main things that we've worked on for her, because it was very difficult for her to sit down and focus on something for 10 minutes, which is a topic in its own, right? So it's confusing, I know. We obviously all know the Olympics only took place this year, but she came back with a silver medal and a bronze medal in 2 events. And what we did with her specifically also, and I know there's a runner in the group, what we did with her specifically is we focused on a visualization, visualizing her races, the few that they were able to go and run, because there was obviously not a lot of races going on before the Olympics. And then we focused on in-training visualization as well, especially in terms of times. There was a specific time she wanted to run. She would, let's say, for example, do a lap. She would visualize, let's say she timed the lap. She was 4 seconds too slow. She would visualize the lap, gain in her mind as to how she gained the 4 seconds, and then run it again. So those were the different types of things that we've actually done with her in terms of her visualization. She had to practice it a lot in the beginning because it was something difficult for her to do. Like I said, for some people it comes naturally, for others it doesn't. But it went so well eventually that, that happens with everybody. If you practice it, it will become easier. That by the time, so what happened in the at the Tokyo Games, in her heat, she ran the heat, won a heat. After the heat, I spoke with her, and I told, we had to voice note obviously because of the time difference, but I told her what to focus on now. And she came back and said, what happened, it was actually interesting, is what happened, she didn't have to consciously think about, okay, this is where my focus now should be. It automatically happened because of all the visualization exercises she did. So that was one of the amazing things that happened, as well as you focus and train and teach yourself and your players this skill, it will eventually be naturally and come naturally to them in terms of, okay, they've learned this, their mind is already in that place where they are actually mentally rehearsing that particular skill. They will see a video that you've showed them. When they go away, their mind is actually already naturally rehearsing what they've seen on screen. So yeah, that is the end of my story. I was hoping I would be quicker. So are there any questions from anybody? Oh, everybody good?
Petroline,
Yes.
I just want to ask a question. So in terms of the visualization tools, in terms of, you spoke about using your mind, is that the only tool that you can use for visualization? So
let's first talk about visualization, sitting down and visualizing whatever it is you want to visualize, right? So the tools in terms of that you can add on are things around sitting to focus, getting people to focus, getting people to have that drive, getting people. So it's not so much that I almost want to say the tool around actual visualization is fairly simple, but getting the person to actually sit down and do the mental rehearsal, that's where the challenge comes in. Getting people. So one of the things, if I come back to Luzanne, that I mentioned that she struggled with, was actually the focus, to sit down and focus. And one of the things that we did was an exercise that she had to do was, you sit in the middle of a room. And nowadays we don't have radios, but you put a phone or a video, whatever, two videos on two separate places, like your phone in one side of the room, another one in the other side of the room, and you switch your concentration, or you switch your focus to what is going on in the one video, listen to what. So obviously for her, it was about what she was hearing. It will be the same for a visual athlete. So to focus on what is that person saying on that video, and then immediately shut down, like shut it out, and immediately focus back on what is the person saying in the other video. That is a difficult exercise to do because our minds wander, but the whole aim of the exercise is you want to be able to listen to this side, switch off, and immediately listen to the other side. And that's just something you need to practice. Another thing is things like around motivation, getting people motivated, right, to sit down and actually do the exercise. Now, I always say motivation is not like a bunch of car keys that you've lost. Everybody has motivation, but you have to, we talk about drivers. When you stack these drivers on top of one another, then that will cultivate the motivation, which are things like curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And that's where the skills part come in. So there are, in terms of sitting down, doing the visualization, you just have to sit down and do the visualization. But like I said, the important part of that is getting all of the senses involved. So what one can do in terms of getting started is let the folks do it for 2 minutes only. If you know, let me give an example. Let's say you go through a video with a team. There's just one snippet of the movement. It can even be like, what, 10 seconds. And cut that and let them visualize that for, let's say, 2 minutes. Even if for some it's 1 minute. But the easiest way to get folks to be able to sit down for 2 minutes, eventually 5 minutes, eventually 10 minutes, is telling them not to do it longer for 2 minutes. So when you start off, their goal is to sit down, visualize not longer than 2 minutes. What will eventually happen is they cannot not visualize for less than 2 minutes. And that's sort of where you can leave them. They will be able to visualize for 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah. Now, my question, because I'm working with kickers, and the one thing that I've learned through what works for us and for the guys that I've been working with is what I'm using is videos, basically like highlights videos, and I cut clips of all the success movements. I'm putting it into a highlights video and I'm sending it to them. And what I'm telling them is every time that they go to bed, because then they are relaxed, go through those videos that I'm sending you for, say, for 5 minutes. Go and look at each movement. Go and look at slow motion, fast forward, every movement. Try to recognize every movement. And what I've found, that's also playing just as a big part in forming those neural pathways. And without really training physically on the field, that also helped their performance on the field.
Perfect. And you are absolutely right, because they visually see that. You can make, and you can make it even more powerful, for example, by asking them if they look, because it sounds like a compilation of cuts, right? By asking them, pick one that you want to work on whenever, let's say the week, or whatever the case might be. And once you've done watching the video tonight, put your phone aside and close your eyes and just visualize what you have seen. And that's a perfect way that you can even amplify that.
Yeah. Maybe if I can share like a story in terms of what I've visualized with was back in 2007. I visualized like for 3 years where I wanted to work. For 3 years, I visualized that, and I got an interview after the 3 years. I've got an interview at that place I visualized with. I've also like visualized like kind of car I went to the interview with. So like everything, came into realization.
It's powerful. It's powerful. Like I said, it's the whole thing around, if you can create something in your body by just fabricating, while thinking about the past, fabricating, not diminishing when I use the word fabricating, but I mean, that's really what our thoughts are. How more powerful can you actually, and I mean, you are a testimony of that, of the things that you can actually visualize that you want to have happen in your life. Thanks for sharing that, Enan. Other questions? Okay. That is the end. If there are any other questions, you can get hold of me at Explosive Minds. It's Explosive Minds. So, and the email is just info@explosiveminds.co.za. If you have any other questions, I will do, unless maybe if there's something that you specifically want to know about, I am planning to do a session on motivation in January, in terms of how can you stack those drivers upon one another. So I'll do that, and I'll let all of you know as well if there's somewhere in the middle of January, I will have another workshop let you guys know about that. But yeah, unless somebody comes back and say, I urgently need something around this and help me with this, that's the plan. All right. Thanks so much for your time, and I appreciate your attendance. I hope to see you again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
Thank you,
Thanks.
Doreen.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.